Hello and welcome back to the Karma Stories podcast. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today I have 4 stories for you from the Malicious Compliance subreddit. The Karma Stories podcast is published to all major podcasting platforms, and you can also read along on YouTube under our @Karma Stories podcast handle. If you have a story you'd like to submit to the podcast, you can do so by email at karmastoriespod@gmail.com. If you enjoy true crime, make sure to check out our new podcast, Karma Crime, also available on every major podcasting platform. Alright, on to today's stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Ancient Educator 76. You better start making more sales. Back in the sun-soaked streets of Phoenix, Arizona, my 14-year-old self squints gleefully into the window of a Chevy Impala rolling down as slowly and choppily as OP's writing. It's time to sell some candy. I hop into my new favorite escape from my life of picking up cigarette butts for my father, rife with opportunity. My job was to sell boxes of cheap candy that my boss, Al, got from who knows where. We sold the candy door to door, an army of tweens driven around by someone triple their age. $5 to $6 a box was our price, $1 a box was our profit. Al got the rest. One weekend, he drove us away from our usual spot, thrust us into Ahwatukee, a prominent neighborhood with lush houses. Al expected big things of us. The day was hot and grueling. That bright, shiny day quickly turned into a sweaty hellscape, ending in anger and the disappointment of only selling 3 boxes. Al was furious. He picked us up from our drop-off locations and drove us to another neighborhood in Ahwatukee. He reamed us, insulting us, and accused us of not trying. The truth was, it was just brutal in every way. People were on vacation. The only people answering were the occasional hired help. He didn't care. He demanded for us to start making way more sales. Enter Malicious Compliance. The next neighborhood he dropped us off in was about a quarter mile from a convenience store. We took the cash we had from our original sales and bought a bunch of cheap candies from the convenience store. We resold those dollar Thin Mints at a significant markup. We kept the extra cash and occasionally sold 1 or 2 of his candies only because people saw them in our box of candies and chose those. Each of us had about $30 cash for ourselves and 20 or so for Al. We made more sales alright. Al just didn't know how much more. OP added a quick update at the bottom. It says, update, one more detail. This started a plan where we bought a bunch of our own personal things to sell for 100% profit, like little toys and baseball cards. It was our most lucrative summer, mine anyways. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called DSXLII. It says, I did basically the same thing in high school. A popular fundraiser for extracurriculars was selling special cheap candy bars for $1 each. I'm old, candy bars were normally maybe 50 cents. There was a grocery store not far from the high school. I'd walk over, buy 6 packs of real candy bars from brands people actually heard of. A 6-pack of Snickers would be about $2. Resell them for the same $1 per bar and blow the profits on magic cards. This story resonated with me because for one summer when I was a teenager, I signed up for a gig where I went door to door for a fundraising company and I made 35% of whatever I brought in. Now, if you think about that, I made 35% of whatever anybody donated to whatever particular charity it was that I was going around for at that time. There was a crew supervisor who drove us to the various neighborhoods, and they got a cut too. And I'm assuming there was an area supervisor as well that got a cut out of that as well. So in the end, out of every $10 donation, I think maybe $1 made it back to the charity, and that's really freaking sad. To this day, I have no idea if this was a legit company or not because they paid us in cash and there was no paperwork. But it was almost 30 years ago now, so we're just gonna leave it at that. This story comes to us from a deleted account. My manager made me fire almost all of her most important employees. I work as an administrative assistant at a major sporting goods retailer. Part of my job is to track attendance and regularly upload a report to corporate. My store manager just recently, in the last 2 years, got hired by our district manager, who she had been friends with for years. They managed to push out the old store manager who had the store running like a ticking clock. Ever since then, it has become abundantly clear that she has no idea how to run the store, and we have all suffered for it. She constantly screws up the store schedule, bullies employees she doesn't like, and has hired incompetent friends to management positions. We all dislike her and think she should be fired, but it seems like everything she does in the store makes us look bad while making her look good. Until recently. Like I said above, part of my job is tracking attendance, yet for years, it has been common knowledge that those in my position are expected to fail to upload attendance records to corporate because the company's policies on attendance are extremely harsh, and many employees fail to meet attendance due to factors out of their control. For instance, employees who come in before we open to process our freight often clock in late because the managers on duty take their sweet time opening the front doors for these employees. It is not their fault that they come in late. And on some occasions, certain employees have been left outside for upwards of 30 minutes after ringing our doorbell because the only person who could open the doors was busy or didn't hear the doorbell, which is soft. Anyway, if I should upload the attendance record to corporate, many of these employees would probably be fired on the spot by our regional manager. Through email because these things are automated and mandatory. As a side note, the store manager is one of the managers who likes to take 10 or 15 minutes to open the door for freight employees. We all hate her for this because when it's winter, we have to wait those 10 or 15 minutes outside the door in the freezing cold, and she acts like it's no big deal. Anyway, her district manager friend recently moved to another district, and we got a new district manager who is looking to move up in corporate. To do this, she has to make all of our metrics look awesome, including attendance. She sent an email to our store manager demanding an attendance record. I told the store manager that this could get many employees fired, but instead of realizing the implications, she told me to run the report anyway. I tried to tell her that this could result in most of the employees who had availability before we open, who are valuable and very rare, getting fired, and she completely blew me off. She literally went as far as saying that I was not thinking straight. I told her that she could adjust the attendance on her end, as the DM clearly wanted her to do. This has been common procedure due to the reasons for poor attendance, and she told me that she was the store manager, she would figure it out, and I should just do my job as I was told. So I ran the report and immediately got a furious email from the new district manager saying that I should have run the report by my store manager to adjust the records before uploading it to corporate. The next day, corporate sent an automated email with the names of all the employees that should be fired, which is not an email that our manager can either respond to or contest. She had to fire all the employees on the email. And as it turned out, every single employee with availability before we open got fired. 15 people. And every other employee in the store is a student with no ability to work before like 10 a.m. So there's nobody to process our freight, which is a massive job. I got an email from a friend in corporate yesterday that said the regional manager was lining up a replacement for our store manager due to incompetence. None of us are surprised. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Painless Candy. It says, automated attendance-based email firings must be the stupidest corporate policy I have heard of yet. OP responded and said, they fired people over email for abusing discounts simply because those people used the discounts on forms of payment that were unusual for them. For instance, my friend got fired because he used his discount with a new credit card, and they assumed he was giving his discount to a friend, even though he could prove it was his credit card. They track types of payments. To say we were angry and confused over it is an understatement. Another commenter down below called Mr. Macfisto said, this stupidity goes beyond your store manager. If the higher-ups think it is reasonable to fire people based on nothing more than an attendance report, the whole company will be in trouble before much longer. OP responded to this one and said, like I said in the post, attendance is strict, and they can fire anyone for that if they choose to. Whether or not it is reasonable is clearly irrelevant to them. I have to admit that I was thrown off a little bit by this story because in the beginning when they said people were fired by email, I was picturing the emails going to the people that were being fired, and that's how they were finding out. But later on, it says the email went to the store manager and the manager had to fire those people. So I do feel like the manager might have a little bit of wiggle room on that if they really need people there. I mean, it's telling me that if they fired all of the people that could get there early and do the stock, that wouldn't be good for the store. So there had to be some wiggle room so that didn't happen. In this case, however, maybe they were saying that they just had to fire all those people so that things went to crap and they had a good reason to fire that store manager anyway. This story comes to us from Kath Joy. Manager forces me to get a doctor's note despite it being illegal to do so. Doctor writes him the most passive-aggressive note, signing me off for 2 weeks instead of 2 days to teach him a lesson. When I was in my early 20s, I worked at a supermarket. I should note that I was a pretty reliable employee. I was never late. In fact, I often got in early, and I rarely called in sick. At the time this happened, I had not called in sick for 9 months, and even then, the manager had sent me home. I had been up all night, swinging between burning hot and freezing cold, so I was obviously feverish, and I had been throwing up at both ends, shall we say. At one point, at about 2 a.m., I was on the toilet with my head in the sink, utterly miserable. I must have passed out because the next thing I knew, I was lifting my head off the sink, and it was 7 a.m. I was due to start work at 12 that day, but obviously that wasn't going to happen. So I called up the manager. Let's call the manager Steve. Steve was well known for being a real butthole. He never believed anyone who called in sick except his best buds, usually other managers, never lowly staff, but often called in sick himself. A lot of the time we knew it was because he was hungover and not actually sick. The conversation went as follows. Hey Steve, sorry, I can't come in, I'm sick. With what? I don't know. I think it might be the flu. I've been up all night being sick and I have a fever. Don't be stupid. If you had the flu, you'd be completely knocked out. I need you in. Come in or you're fired. I can't. I just told you I can't stop vomiting. I passed out. Steve was growling angrily. Either come in or bring a doctor's note or you're fired. In the UK, you are legally allowed to self-certify for 5 days. This means you can tell your employer you are sick and you do not need a doctor's note. If you're sick for more than 5 days, you need a note. It is also illegal to demand a doctor's note during the self-certify period. I knew this, but I was terrified. This was during the recession. I couldn't afford to lose my job. So I got myself dressed, almost passed out trying to do so, then trudged to the doctor's some 25 minutes walk away. I end up sitting in the doctor's office for a little over an hour, which for a walk-in was pretty good. I get in to see the doctor, and she is furious at me for coming in. You're not supposed to come to the doctor's when you have a cold or flu. And of course, I knew I should be able to self-certify. She told me as such, saying I shouldn't be here and should have stayed at home. I then explained what had happened with Steve and how he had threatened to fire me over this, and I couldn't afford to lose my job. I was struggling as it was. My doctor turned her anger towards my manager. She asked if I got sick pay from the company, and I said yes. He wants a sick note, does he? The doctor says. Okay, I'll give him a sick note. Now, my manager just wanted a note confirming I was sick, but instead, my doctor wrote something along the lines of this. OP has come to the surgery because manager name has insisted she come in spite of the fact that this is illegal and all employees are allowed to self-certify. Due to being forced to make this unnecessary and highly dangerous trip when the patient is ill, has a fever of 39 Celsius, and almost passed out in the waiting room, I am signing OP off for 2 full weeks to recover. Had OP been allowed to self-certify, as is the law, they might have only needed a few days, but due to straining themselves, they now require 2 full weeks. They are not permitted to work until the date 2 weeks later. The doctor said she would have signed me off longer, but this was the longest she could do without requiring further evidence. So basically, instead of just being off for a few days, I was now signed off for a full 2 weeks, and I'd be paid for it. I went to my place of work, at which point one of the duty managers saw me and asked me what in the heck I was doing here. Go home, I was obviously very unwell. I explained what happened. They agreed to help me downstairs to Steve's office and went inside with me. I handed Steve the note. He looked worried and tried to say, I wasn't serious about firing you. Well, gee, When you angrily growled it down the phone, it sure sounded like it. The duty manager then declared that they were going to drive me home. It was clear Steve wanted to argue, but had the sense to know he shouldn't. The duty manager then drove me home, made sure I was okay, then went back to work, where they informed our union rep of what had happened. Steve had a disciplinary hearing where he was given a severe reprimand and a warning. Steve tried to argue he never said I'd be fired, and I was lying, and just decided to go to the doctors, but the duty manager said they heard him admit to it when he said to me that he really didn't mean it. I felt better after a few days and enjoyed my 2 weeks off, fully paid, and enjoyed the nice weather we had. Meanwhile, Steve was forced to work overtime because we were short-staffed. So, thanks to the doctor, instead of being off for a few days, I ended up getting a nice 2-week paid vacation. And Steve was given a final warning, all because he insisted I get a doctor's note. OP added an edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, to clarify the whole, you're not supposed to come in when you are ill, I should have been more specific. The rule is, you're not supposed to come in when you have a cold or flu. The reason is, there's nothing a doctor can really do except recommend you take over-the-counter cold and flu meds. So it is recommended that you do not come in if you have a cold or flu and instead take meds at home or pick up some at the pharmacy instead of risking infecting those waiting in the surgery. Even then, it's not a hardcore rule, a common courtesy asked of people. If you really want to, you absolutely can. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, we have one from a user called CWorthinessOld2390. It says, I know it's not the point of the story, but respect to the duty manager for backing the employee's claim that Steve threatened to fire him. Often, managers stick together. It's rare a manager will openly go against another during a disciplinary. I agree with that one myself, but it's also clear to see that Steve was already in some crap because this one put him on a final warning. That meant he had other warnings before this, and that means he wasn't a very good manager. So it's very likely that this other manager wanted Steve's butt out of that seat anyway, maybe to move into it for themselves. This story comes to us from TRXBunny79. Lazy manager learns how not to treat a dependable employee. Working in retail most of my life, I have encountered some really bad managers. As such, I know I became a pretty petty employee, and I've served up some sweet malicious compliance in my day. This is by far my favorite story though, because it even has a touch of petty revenge. Years ago, when I was just a newlywed, I worked for an auto parts retailer. We serviced professional garages as well as walk-in customers. My job was as a merchandiser. This meant it was my duty to keep up with the displays and inventory. I checked in shipments and put them away every day. I put up the sales images in the windows, and when areas needed to be changed, stock moved, new price labels put up, etc., that was my job. Those tasks didn't usually take all day. I could get them done in a few hours. The rest of my day was spent working the counter, answering calls, helping customers, cleaning, and getting to take the delivery truck out to deliver parts to the garages. Driving deliveries was the best. I could listen to the radio, have a soda, and visit with the clients. But I had the misfortune of working for the laziest manager I've ever known. We'll call him LM for short. Seeing a trustworthy worker who had a good relationship with the clients, LM began putting more responsibilities on me. Time wore on, and my job description was forgotten. I started having to answer his emails, deal with the interstore and corporate memos that came in, and running deposits to the bank when the assistant manager wasn't there. This wasn't a big deal. It took maybe 45 minutes at most each day, and I wasn't having to deal with the often misogynistic walk-in customers, so I didn't mind. Then came the day our assistant manager left. I can't remember if he quit or got a transfer or what. Long time ago, doesn't matter. LM decides, since I'm so dependable, to give me keys to the store and start scheduling me to close, so he can go home to his wife and kids. Hey, it's more hours, so I don't mind at first, and he dangles that lovely promotion over my head. Ooh, the thought of a raise had me jumping because, as I said, I was a newlywed, and we were saving to buy a house. The promotion never came. According to LM, I didn't have the required ASE certification to be an assistant manager, so I was still on payroll as a merchandiser, despite the fact that I was now opening the store 6:30 a.m., closing the store there till after 10 p.m. some nights, making deposits, making sure all the drawers had proper change, handling emails, answering interstore and corporate memos, checking in stock and controlling inventory, making sure the store looked as it should, still handling the counter to cover lunch breaks for everyone else, still making deliveries, handling the majority of the professional client accounts, handling employment applications and interviews for new hires, entering the schedule and adjusting payroll for all the other employees. I was full on doing the assistant manager job with nothing to show for it, except circles under my eyes because LM was constantly changing my schedule to suit his needs. Anytime I tried to tweak the schedule to give myself even 2 days off in a row, he'd come in behind me and change it. All he basically did was cover for me on my rare days off, and spent most of his day BSing with customers or going out for professional visits with a couple of clients who were friends of his. LM's attitude nearly cost us some of our big accounts, but since I was constantly driving a delivery truck on top of everything else, I had a better relationship with most of the clients. We're in the South, even grease monkeys won't be rude to a lady. I was able to get them to keep their business with us. It helped that I was slightly plump and sweet-faced young woman. My calming manner and reasonable politeness could always calm them down. But you're waiting for Malicious Compliance. Here it comes. Our store got a major revamp. We're talking overtime, new displays, grand reopening. It was huge. This also occurred around the same time as the big yearly week-long management conference. So my hours skyrocketed. After LM got back from the management conference, he took off for another week to spend time with his family, leaving me in charge again. It was pure hell. For 2 months, I worked practically non-stop. I think in a 90-day period after that grand reopening, I had 3 days off. The last straw came when I opened a corporate memo reminding LM that his ASE certification had never been completed, and he needed to contact them about setting up a time for the test. What? All this time, he wasn't even certified either? I was done. It was time to lay it on the line. After a late night close where I didn't get home until 11 p.m., I was back in the store at 6:30 a.m. to open. I hadn't had a full day off in 3 weeks at this point. I was doing my usual duties, getting ready for the other employees to show up, when in walks LM. You know how this goes, I won't insult your intelligence. Oh, hey, I just wanted to drop in and remind you to make sure you do the payroll today. Of course I'm going to do payroll today. It's on my list. Note, I'm speaking in a sleep-deprived, depressed tone because I was completely exhausted. Good, and I saw there's some new display materials still back here. You should have gotten that done already. We were slammed yesterday and had 2 guys call in sick. I didn't have time. I'll get it done. Hey, listen, I've been meaning to ask you. I know we don't have anyone else asking for time off right now. I've got time saved up and I could really use a vacation. He cut me off. No. What? No way, I need you here. My anniversary is next week and I promised my wife. I cut him off. Seriously? Everybody else here gets to take long weekends or full weeks of vacation, and I'm burning out. I've been working near solid for the last 3 months, including the whole weekend of my husband's birthday. Well, I'm the boss, and I get to say who gets vacation. You can have Sunday off or something. It was Tuesday, I think, I can't remember, but Sunday was several days away. I was so done with his crap, I started raising my voice. No, that's not good enough. I'm tired, I work to the bone. I'm answering calls at my own house with our business name. You go home every night to your wife and kids, and a clean house and supper waiting, and your laundry done, and there's no one at my house doing that while I'm here 60 hours a week. I want my vacation, and you're going to approve it. Either that, or you sit down here right now and put in for my raise and a promotion. You can't just make demands like that. You don't have the ASE certification anyway. I can't just hand you a promotion. You need to calm down. I gritted my teeth at this point. I was ready to shove that corporate memo down his throat. Just give me a set schedule and a long weekend then. I need more than 1 day off a month. He laughs at me. Ha, that's not how this works. I need you here, and I'll schedule you when I need you. If you want a set schedule and a raise, you might as well look for another job. Now, little note, I kept my keys to the store on a special little keychain that I always clip to my belt loop. When he said that, it was malicious compliance time. I jerked the keys off my belt loop and threw them at him. Fine, I will. Run it your darn self. I turn and start walking to the back door. Hey, get back here. You're scheduled to work today. I'm not even supposed to be here. He probably should have thought of that before he decided to drop in on me on his day off. I'm out the door and heading to my car, fuming. He's at the door with my keys in his hand. What exactly are you doing? What does it look like I'm doing? I'm quitting. You told me to look for another job, so that's exactly what I'm going to do. I drove off, leaving him in the parking lot, gaping at me like a goldfish. When I got home, he was already calling, and my husband had picked up. The idiot was actually asking my husband if I'd really quit, and if I'd come back into work, maybe once I had calmed down. I ended up being contacted at home by the district manager. I told him everything. He admitted that ASE certification was only really required for managers, and there was no reason I shouldn't have been promoted to assistant. I brought up that I should really just lawyer up and sue them for gender discrimination. He offered me a generous severance package if I promised not to sue. I was so tired and done with the whole company that I agreed. I got my last 60+ hour paycheck mailed to me, and then also got a second check for 80 hours of paid vacation. The LM had to run the place by himself for a couple days until the district manager got him help. He didn't last with the company very long after that. OP added a quick edit down at the bottom. It says, edit, for those wondering why I didn't get the ASE certification, it required a certain amount and type of work experience that I did not have. I couldn't have qualified for it, or tested for it, even if he'd allowed me the time off to go and sit for the test. Google it sometime. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called BFAB227. It says, you know what I think? If your boss says, go find another job, you just go find another job. If your manager is treating you like crap, then just quit. OP responded and said, as stated in the post, I was a young newlywed. I enjoyed the job, just the hours became overwhelming, and LM's treatment just kept getting steadily worse until it wasn't worth it anymore. When you're young and broke and saving to better yourself, you'll put up with a lot of crap. But yeah, he picked the wrong words that day, and I happily, maliciously complied. You guys have heard a bunch of times here me mentioning my old manager Rick, and it was that same story there. He had big fish in a little pond syndrome and was just difficult to be around. It was his way or the highway, and you weren't really even allowed to think. I don't have any crazy stories of compliance myself from when I left that job, but I did leave because the manager was a giant dick. So yeah, screw you, Rick. If you enjoyed daily Reddit stories, I encourage you to follow and give us a 5-star rating on whichever podcasting platform you enjoy the most. And if you're watching and listening on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button and drop a like on the video. It really helps us out. I thank you for watching and listening. I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you tomorrow.